Welcome back to The Factor, for the latest insights in the life sciences industry, brought to you by Kymanox. Today's episode is hosted by Shivali Patel, Technical Project Manager at Kymanox, and we're diving into the world of project management with two incredible guests who bring a wealth of experience and unique perspectives to the table. Joining Shivali are Natalie Robrick and Max Tenenbaum. Natalie flew in from the Boston office, and she's a senior project manager at Kymanox with a master's in science management and a background in chemical engineering from Notre Dame. And from the California office, we have Max Tenenbaum, technical project manager at Kymanox, who brings a fascinating career journey that includes roles as a senior designer and chemist with degrees in chemical engineering from UC Berkeley and Stony Brook University. In this episode, they'll explore why project management is critical in life sciences, how to optimize communication workflows, and the tools that keep everything running smoothly. So let's get started. Here's Natalie answering the question, why is it important for companies to utilize a project manager?
Why does a football team have a quarterback?
Good point.
And I think the big thing with a project manager is having a single point of contact and someone who's accountable and responsible for a project being complete and moving forward and maintaining those schedule milestones. So if you don't have a project manager, it's difficult for team members to know who's responsible for what, and having that single point of contact, assigning tasks really, really helps and makes things move along.
I couldn't agree more, honestly. You don't want to be playing telephone, especially when the team, you can get away with it when your team's like 2 or 3 people, sure. But when you start expanding into cross-functional teams in major corporations, like good luck. You need one point of contact. You need someone who knows the ins and outs of the project, and that's your project manager. So I totally couldn't agree more.
All right, great. I totally agree with that. I think it's very important to have project managers on projects. They make every project such an ease, because it's so important the way we collaborate with different functional teams, and also just keeping everybody aligned on expectations. It takes more than just, 1 or 2 people talking to each other. So it's very important for people to use project managers. I can definitely use one, actually, more in my life. Yes, definitely.
It'd be great if we had our own personal project managers.
Exactly, right? Like I can do that for work, but I need somebody to manage my personal life. So can you guys talk to us about a typical communication workflow when you start a new project and kicking off a new project at Kymanox is what I mean.
Yeah, I can, basically most of the times when it starts off, you want to meet with like an internal team first, just, go over your SOW, the work to be performed, and get a sense of the deliverables, milestones, the expectations for what that's going to look like before you want to meet with like your external stakeholders. Then you'll start setting up communications with your external stakeholders. So you'll probably have at least a lead somewhere in your project charter or in your SOW identified. You'll reach out to them. And you'll schedule a kickoff, and you'll find out what other stakeholders they'd want to have in that kickoff meeting. And that's sort of the very preliminary starts of every project is, getting that kickoff in place, because that's where you're going to outline the major stakeholders, major deliverables, bills. Yeah, exactly. Communication also, again, which is a huge part of your project, and basically any sort of budgetary restrictions, right? So it all gets covered in that kickoff.
Yeah. And I think project management work is so front loaded, and getting that initial kickoff set up takes so much more work than people realize, because like you said, first you're coordinating with your internal team, and you have to ask them questions like, do you understand how many hours a week this is going to take? Or are you aligned with that? Like, what is your current workload? Can you support something like this? Then when you get to the point of getting everyone aligned internally, you have to you have to schedule a meeting with the client whose calendars you can't see. So you're like coordinating back and forth on a time slot where everyone in the room who needs to be there can meet. So a lot of that upfront communication is really important. Yeah. And one thing I was thinking of is Kymanox as a company, like we have the PMO department. We have an entire SOP set up for someone who owns a project and how to get that started in this back-end systems, the front-end systems, and all those communication points of contact.
Yeah, and that SOP definitely comes in handy. I mean, all the templates that come with it. So it's it's super helpful to have, especially for those, you don't always have a project manager, but you might have a technical lead for them, especially those who aren't necessarily in the PMO to have that availability. Yeah.
And when talking to your clients, people have all different types of communication preferences, like whether it's chatting, emailing, just calling someone on the phone. So asking things like that in a kickoff meeting with a client is also really important, just to understand how they prefer to communicate with you.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, and that goes into that planning phase. It's all part of planning that out. And I think getting that out on paper and agreed upon it helps, because then later, you don't have different back channels. Sometimes people like pinging on, different forums like Teams or Slack or, versus Outlook. Mm-hmm. And it just gets challenging. But getting that upfront, I think, prevents a lot of miscommunication or misinformation being spread across the team. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think setting up those preferences, making sure that the team's expectations are clarified ahead of the project. The kickoff meeting is usually what we do, is the best approach. Having a communications plan, that is something that has saved my life for the last few projects that I've been on, because when you work with a larger team, I think it just becomes very critical to have everybody's preferences, especially when you have teams that are spread out across countries and the time zone differences. So having that clarified ahead of time, it just saves you so much hassle later on the project. So yeah, that was great. All right. So I think that this is a good segue into the next question here. I've heard this somewhere that the project managers usually prefer the left brain approach, which makes sense because we're all very detail oriented. We love our Gantt charts. We like to keep things organized, keep our trackers, things like that. That is more of the left brain approach. But in reality, we know that the right brain approach, which is more focusing on the creativity side of things and being more flexible, applying more of that emotional intelligence and using and understanding your teams. As a project manager, I feel like we normally jump back and forth to our left brain and right brain to make sure that we're also keeping things organized, but at the same time understanding the team's dynamics, also being very flexible with changes that happens within the scope, budget, other things, right, in our projects. And so we definitely rely on a lot of tools and trackers and systems that helps us keep things organized, and more importantly, keeps us organized, right? Like keeps us more sane. So maybe just asking you guys what kind of tools and systems do you guys use to keep you guys more organized and manage your projects more effectively?
I was going to say, typically, I think the most commonly used ones are trackers, RACIs, dashboards, timelines. I mean, I think every project has at least one of those in some form or another. It might not be as detailed in some, it might not be as built out in others, but I think you'll see those. And as trackers goes, there's document trackers, there's action item trackers, follow-ups, et cetera, risk management. So there's risk matrices. I think timelines typically, will be used in substitute of whether it's even like a lot of the times can be used as a document tracker or in some sense of like a deliverable tracker, because sometimes it's important to have, sometimes clients want to see the dates involved, like how everything flows. So you'll have your timeline, and in other cases, they just want to see, okay, this is everything we need to have. And by like just this date, there's not like necessarily a flow that needs to happen.
Yeah.
But I would say, I normally don't keep those very rigid. I think every client has a different way they want to see those. So, and that's part of like the emotional intelligence of also being able to understand, like, it's not my way or the highway. It's just working with the client or your team, and everyone has their preferences. So be open-minded. And I do think EQ is a huge part of project management. Natalie, I don't know how you feel about that. But.
Yeah, no, I do. So I think like our most often used tool is a project timeline. And for the most part, we make that on MS Projects or Smartsheet. But you can get really detailed with those, which is very helpful in some cases. But sometimes it's really hard to visualize like how work streams are working in parallel. So lately, I have one client that wants me to maintain that project schedule in the background, but work on day-to-day meetings once a week and everything on like a one-slide Gantt chart that shows, honestly, like a 3-year project in one slide. Sometimes it's a little difficult, but you keep it high level enough. And when you can see that all in one spot, it's easier to strategize, like you were saying. I think that's the right brain, more of like free thinking, creativity, like looking at, okay, if this work stream starting at the same time as that work stream, do you have enough people to execute on that? Or this one's starting a little after that other work stream, but would it make more sense given the content of the work to start these at the same time? So that, I think just speaking on timelines, like that's a big one where you're kind of left brain, right brain.
Great. My favorite is the project timeline. And if you talk to anybody that I've worked with on my project teams, they can tell you the same. I love to pull up my timelines. and I know, as you said, that's probably not everybody's favorite, especially technical teams. They don't want to see the timeline. So another one that I use for my project teams is the dashboard approach. So I think that is another one, right? Like just having that view and being more flexible with your team, what works for your team, what makes them more effective. You want the tools to be kind of a helpful tool instead of just adding on more work to kind of keep track of, right? Yeah. So I think that has been super helpful for me. Dashboards are my favorite. You guys, like every project, I love to create projects. I also have one to manage my own tasks for the projects. So I think that has been super helpful for me.
I don't want to get too off topic, but I was just thinking about like, we just talked about timelines and dashboards, but the trackers part, sometimes I feel like you can over project manage something and have too many tools in place that like your team members start to get frustrated with you about all the different things they might have to update. So I feel like with my style, and like this is back to the right brain approach, my favorite style of project management is to try and keep the least amount of tools as possible that cover the most content. Like I usually just have one action tracker that would capture risks as well and decisions, and then a timeline if I can help it. Sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you need a deliverable matrix or something, but trying to like limit the tools makes it less confusing for people.
I totally agree. I mean, I same way. I try to keep everything into a timeline if possible. Like if I need to have an additional tracker for something like action items or risk, they'll have a separate one. But I typically use my timelines as my deliverable tracker. Like anything is listed out there, and I'll break it up. So like for a client, if I need to present it, if it's too much, I'll break it out. I'll say, here's the deliverables up to this stage that we need, and there's no dates, there's nothing assigned, but here you go. If we need the dates, we can dive into the timeline. And I've had it where the internal team has even overcomplicated certain ones where we tried to mash everything into a timeline and make this massive behemoth like it's supposed to be an all-in one-stop shop tracker, and that becomes too confusing for everyone. So simplicity is better. Agreed. I think it's easier to lose pertinent information, and also then communication break down that way if you start losing that. So
that is true.
I totally agree, Natalie. Totally agree.
That is true. So what are the most common communication challenges you guys have observed on your project teams?
The first one that jumps to mind is misinterpreting written communication, like specifically like the tone of something, especially if it's feedback. Like if it's in an email or a comment on a document, and you're the author of said email or document, and you're receiving that feedback, it is so easy to just read it in a negative tone without like someone speaking it to your face positively. So I think that's a very common communication breakdown I've seen, is my team members getting frustrated and responding back and forth a few too many times on feedback they've received. And if it was just on a call in the first place, it would have been taken, received, and moved on. Like progress would be made way faster.
No, I totally agree. Written communication is it's one of those, like, even in texting, right? You don't hear the tonality of anything, right? It's the same idea in the professional work environment via emails or written feedback on a document that you're working on. And honestly, a lot of the times we work with a lot of technical people here at Kaiman. As PMs, like we're not really the technically strong. We have technical backgrounds, but there are people who are more technically strong than us.
And they've spent like a lot of time just deep diving into their area of focus.
That's right. Yep. And when they write, when they're trying to write emails out to the clients per se on certain, or want to ask them certain things to get information, they tend to approach the email the same way they approach every other problem, which is a very detailed explanation of what they're looking for. And it's sort of the question comes last. So whenever I have someone reaching out to the client on, to get information from the technical team, I try to ask if I can review that just to make sure that the question is put up front. So that isn't lost somewhere in the body of the email, like what they're looking for, whatever the information is. Make that bolded or put it up front, wherever that may be, but before they give all the context, because they like to work context first, then question, or here's the problem and this is what I'm looking for, instead of this is what I'm looking for and here's the problem. Written communication is a big one. And I think the other one that I've noticed that I find to be frustrating, unfortunately, is not having the correct stakeholders in meetings, like decisions made without the proper stakeholders in place. Because honestly, there are several clients who go about having a decision made with only a few stakeholders, and we find out later that not all the proper stakeholders were in place to make that decision. So they get this document or they get something down the road, and they're like, hold on, why was that? Why was this done the way it was? It's clearly not right. And now so they have to do all the rework, go backwards, incorporate the client, the proper stakeholders' feedback, and then move forward again. And it just wastes a whole ton of time.
Yeah. No, I think I agree totally with that, because this is such a common breakdown in communications that happens on our projects. And that's where we talked about kickoff and having a good communications plan at the beginning of the project helps. I think one thing that has definitely helped me is, every time a new stakeholder gets added, you want to make sure you go through that RACI chart you have made and make sure what the role of this new stakeholder is, how they would like to stay connected to the project. Are we just informing them? Are we needing some input from them? I think it's very important to continuously go in and update all of our trackers and all the communication plans specifically every time you have a new team member added. But I know I can totally relate to that challenge, because I see that on almost every project that we get added on.
That can be so frustrating, especially, I said this at the beginning of the podcast, but scheduling a meeting with the right people and finding time, especially decision makers who tend to be the busiest people, if they don't show up or if they aren't involved when you need them to be. And someone on the call says, we can't really have this conversation without so-and-so present. It's just like, So in that case, sometimes I will, if it's critical or if it doesn't seem like a high stakes decision, I'll say, how about we come up with a proposal for a decision on this call, and I'll email that person asking them, does this look good? If so, give me a thumbs up. But if it doesn't, we're happy to get back on the phone and chat at a time that works for you.
Yeah. I think that's an appropriate way to handle it. It's a good way. I mean, at least it doesn't waste your time in the meeting that you've scheduled. Obviously, if the other stakeholders feel like, let's not even bother to do a proposal, fine. You obviously cater to their wishes, but at least you don't waste 30 minutes in the other way. Yeah.
I loved what you said earlier, Max, too, about long emails.
And I had my manager at my old company. I think that the best way they described it to me, and something that it instantly stuck in my head, is picture whoever it is, doesn't matter who you're emailing, but think of it like you're typing to an executive level person. They're so busy, they don't have the time to read anything more than a couple of sentences. So whatever you want to get out, it's like an elevator pitch. You got 30 seconds. Put it out there and get it out.
Yeah.
If they have more time, they'll read it. But if not, at least they know upfront what it is you're looking for.
Yeah. And sometimes those technical details are important. So I know one thing that has worked for me is maybe highlighting the question, or putting a list of questions or actions that we're looking for from this email. That's why I think that is something that I tell my team, if they are sending out an email with data, especially to the client, make sure you guys highlight or bold or let the questions or decisions or something pop out. So it's easier for people who are reading it to get to the point, right? So I think that has been super helpful. But that's really great. These are great, feedback here. What is the value for Kaiman in having its own dedicated project management office?
I think we touched on this a little earlier, right? Where we were talking about having some of the SOPs in place, right? I think that having a PMO department helps standardize some of the SOPs and templates that we can use, and that becomes accessible not only to the PMs at the company, but to everyone, like technical leads who have to function as a PM and that technical lead on a project. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of having a personalized PMO department. And obviously then, you'll have a readily available stream of PMs ready to go on any project or multiple projects, which
there is a client need for that.
Exactly.
Like, a lot of my projects are just a project manager with managing the client's own team. So
yep. So I think that's another huge benefit. Natalie, do you have any others that come top of mind?
Yeah, I think having our own department gives us a lot of a structured approach in continuous improvement. So we have a whole team of people dedicated to project managing. And with that comes training, discussion forums on how to best practice approaches with clients and stuff. So having an entire department dedicated to that is really helpful.
That is awesome. Of course, standardized processes, standardized templates, and having a dedicated PMO team of our own. I think that just helps us create this strong service area that we can take it on to our clients, and then, of course, eventually the patients who matters, right? So I think that's really great to have our own dedicated PMO here at Kymanox. Okay, so now that we've gotten through all the questions, let's have a little bit fun, and we will do a quick rapid fire round. This is something new that we are trying out, so we're going to kick this segment here with you guys first. This is how it's going to work out. I'm going to ask you guys questions, and you guys will answer that as quickly as possible. You guys can take turns, and then we'll just see how you guys do. All right. Email or instant message?
I only instant message if it's something critical and I need a response within like the next few minutes. If I need that, then I am. But email for almost everything else, I think, for me.
Yeah, I feel like my gut reaction is instant message.
I am like you, Natalie. I love my instant messaging and calls over instant messaging. I've been known for notoriously just calling out people like, hey, do you have a minute for a call? And just call them. I think that's my best way to get things done is just like get on a call, get everything done, or an instant message, of course. But I totally agree. Email is great for traceability, especially when you're communicating critical information related to your projects, to your stakeholders, things like that. All right. So the second question, best time of the day for team meetings?
I think this is going to sound weird, but like a 2 to 3 p.m. meeting.
Got to prevent that post-lunch siesta.
Yeah, the post-lunch siesta.
I kind of agree. I like the 2 to 3 p.m. time frame. I also like the 10 to 11 a.m.s. I don't know, it's something also, I am productive in the morning, but knowing I have to be like ready for something at between 10 and 11, right before lunch. It also keeps you going into lunch, and then you get your lunch, whether it be 12 or 1 p.m.
Wow, I like that. 2 to 3 is not my favorite time, but I think it's a great idea. I think the reasoning behind it is really good because I, of course, that is the time when I need my second or third cup of coffee for the day to keep me going. I think this may be better to replace a coffee. But yeah, I think I totally agree. I think morning times have been the best for me. Stand-ups, agreed. Like if it's more than 15 minutes, I feel like for stand-up calls, more than 15 minutes is a little too much. You just need to get through like where is everybody on their tasks, if they need any help, and what's coming up next. So, but love that. All right. So most overused project management buzzword. I want to hear this one.
Oh, there are a lot. For me, I think it's personally like, key performance indicators, KPIs. You hear them all the time. I don't know. I don't personally love judging a project by KPIs, but you got to do it. Clients want to see them. So for me, that one's that. So
mine is critical path. I think if a client's asking me, or I guess if I'm on a call talking about some sort of work stream that is having problems and someone asks, is that critical path? And it's not, immediately it gets written off. But if it goes too long and it gets delayed too far, it will quickly become critical path. And then you've got 5 things that are critical paths. So that's a buzzword that like makes it like stands my spine up straight,
Yeah.
Next one, favorite way to deliver good news or bad news for that matter.
If it's to a technical lead or if it's like to a lead of a project, I like doing it via email usually, just to give them the heads up. If it so happens that the news happens right before a meeting, obviously I'll do it in person. But to the broader team in general, I prefer doing it via call. I don't like sending out an IM or an email. I think it's just better. Bad news, I always prefer email, if I'm going to be honest. I don't want to be looking someone in the face if they get mad, if we can avoid it. But good news, definitely. I prefer email first and then broader team via call.
I think my personal preference is delivering bad news over the phone, especially on camera, because then if they get mad, they have to look at my face and get mad rather than just like look at a blank screen. But good news, I do love email communication with good news because you can write it in a way that you know people will like forward it and circulate it to celebrate. So that's fun. If you get the chance on a call, that's great and people love hearing it and you should always do that. But sometimes when you're delivering good news and everyone's just muted out of respect for you talking, you're kind of met with silence and it's like, all right, that was great. Now let's move on.
All right. Well, this was great. And that brings us to the end of our rapid fire round. We'll take it one notch further and we'll do a role play. I know this is a new segment as well. It may be just a little bit more fun to really dive into project managers' lives and what it takes to do a job of a project manager. So a brief role play scenario. I'll give you guys a quick situation and you guys can act it out. You guys decide who you want to play. And then we'll just see you guys in action here. So we're going to call this section Helpful Tricks by Kymanox. All right, so here's the situation. A client or customer is frustrated because they weren't informed about a project delay that impacted their deliverables.
Max, I'm really frustrated right now. I just found out that the product testing is delayed and we were supposed to have the reports by next week so we could review the results and move forward into the next phase of the project. And I only found out because one of my team members brought it up. Why wasn't I in the loop from the start? This is going to affect everything on our end.
I completely understand your frustration, Natalie, and I'm really sorry you weren't informed earlier. The testing reports were delayed because there were some shipping delays that we weren't accounting for, and our testing vendors also had a longer than expected queue time to do those tests. This kind of pushed the testing start date, and we weren't able to get the data on the projected timelines. So I should have communicated this to you as soon as we knew there was going to be a delay, so I take full responsibility for that.
We've built our whole timeline and those reports are critical path. My team was ready to start reviewing them, analyzing the results, and planning the next steps. Now I have to reorganize my team's workload and we will have a delayed milestone.
You're absolutely right. Missing those deadlines could cause a chain reaction that impacts everything downstream. My priority right now is to ensure we get those reports to you as quickly as possible and we don't face any further setbacks. So let's work together to figure out a solution. What would be most helpful for your team right now to stay aligned with your schedule?
If we can get the testing reports 2 weeks later than planned, we can still make the necessary adjustments and keep things moving. But it's crucial to stay in contact with the testing site so they don't slip any further.
Got it. Understood. So we'll aim to get the reports to you within the next 2 weeks. I'll schedule a status meeting twice a week starting this week, and we'll go over progress on that testing and make sure that you're regularly updated on those reports and when they'll be delivered to ensure you're kept in the loop.
All right, that works. I just need to know what's going on at all times. We can get back on track, but I need that level of transparency moving forward.
I hear you, Natalie, and I'll make sure that we keep those lines of communication open. We'll also explore potential mitigation strategies to help prevent this sort of testing issue in the future. And I'm really sorry for the lack of information earlier, and I'll do everything I can to ensure it doesn't happen again.
End scene.
That was great. I loved how, I think what we saw at play was a good communication. The client was frustrated in the beginning, but Max, the project manager here, was able to not only take accountability of that situation, but also propose some solutions. And then in the end, it seems like, they came to a good resolution and the path forward. I think that is something that we normally have to go through at like so many projects. I think when we come across some of the delays or some of those risks and the bad, I guess the bad news delivering, right? So I think it's very critical how we share that information, how we take that information from the client, and not run into a conflict. I think it's good. And I think this was a great role play. Thank you so much, both of you.
2 points on that situation. I think a lot of times when people are frustrated in a work setting, they feel like they weren't told information when they should have been. And I think in this situation, like, obviously I was a frustrated stakeholder and Max was trying to appease me, but Max didn't really make any false promises to me, which is important, even though I was mad. And he said, we'll work on any other potential mitigations. I think specifically so it doesn't happen again, but also in that situation, we would go offline and see, is there anything else we can do and propose like an alternative solution to try and minimize this delay in a way that we didn't think of before. So like, you don't want to make any promises in the moment, but you do want to say we're doing everything we can to try and fix this problem.
Yeah, and totally agree. And I think that's the mitigations involved is obviously communication, but that's sort of outlined in what the next steps were. But it's more, mitigating the delay next time, right? So you have some strategies in place so that maybe this isn't like, okay, even if something gets delayed, big deal. It's maybe like one day instead of several weeks or something of that nature, just to have it in place. And sometimes the mitigation is entirely, preventative, like it goes down to zero. If you have something back up, So that's definitely important. The client definitely wants to see that. It's not that something happened and you did nothing about it. It's, something happened, you were at fault, but at least you tried, you did something.
Yes. And I love, Natalie, that, the point you brought up is like, not making promises to the client when you are in that situation. It's because you sometimes as project managers, like, we're not technical SMEs. We don't exactly know like what all will it take for us to resolve that issue. So so I think it makes sense to like, say, let me take this information to the team and maybe come up with other proposed solutions to this situation. I think that is very important. Okay. So I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. A huge thank you to both of you for, taking us through this experience and sharing your expertise and experiences and diving into the world of project management here with all these questions and the rapid fire round and this role play, of course. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shivali, for having us. This has been really fun. We hope to do this again in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Shivali, and also, thanks, Natalie, for joining. It's great sharing the spotlight. Honestly, it's been a lot of fun. I do hope we get to do another one of these in the future, maybe on another topic other than communication, because there's a lot more to project management.
Unpack, yeah. Lot to unpack.
That was Natalie Robrick and Max Tenenbaum sharing their expertise on project management and life sciences. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful and engaging as we did. For more on Kymanox and our commitment to accelerating success in the life sciences industry, visit kymanox.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and follow The Factor on LinkedIn to stay in the loop with future episodes and industry updates. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Factor.